StockPulse.com on location, the second annual StockPulse Silver Symposium. We've got Chris Marcus here from Arcadia Economics. Wrote a fantastic book, The Big Silver Short, so who better to have on here to talk about silver than Chris Marcus, so appreciate you making the trip.
Rob, thanks for having me. Nice to be here at the Silver Symposium, which you've brought back, and I think people have been enjoying that this week, and it's great to see the conference you put together, so good to be here.
Appreciate that. So yeah, let's get right into it here. Silver's in a little bit of a depressed state, I guess, for some of these juniors. I know you've got a thesis. I imagine you're probably just accumulating and probably okay with the price for now, but I imagine you see big things coming. So how's Chris Marcus see it?
I'm doing all right, and certainly it's been a tough time watching silver. I mean, it was just a couple months ago, early March, after the unfortunate Russian invasion of Ukraine. You saw that spike in gold and silver prices. Gold over $2,000 again, silver up above 26, and shortly after that, Fed starts raising interest rates, and it's been quite a sell-off since then. And I guess it's interesting this time where, I don't know, I've approached this from a long-term perspective where, again, seeing the imbalances in the debt load, which has not gone anywhere, not just the US, but around the globe, and seeing the central banks print unimaginable amounts of money. I mean, I got into gold and silver back in 2009, and we thought there was a lot of money printing back then. It's accelerated, Fed's balance sheet up tenfold since then, yet we do have the Fed raising interest rates aggressively. Balance sheet hasn't come down all that much yet, but certainly the metals prices. So, and it's tough, especially telling people about silver a lot, where I get it and I see the feedback and that, you know, people are having a tough time with it. And I think the long-term fundamentals haven't changed, but certainly it's interesting seeing how much the metals prices have come down so far.
You wrote a book, Big Silver Short. Why'd you do it?
I just thought there was a story that was important to tell, where, especially what's been happening in the metals, reminds me of what I lived through in the housing crisis, seeing how you had this situation build that most people were caught blindsided by. Again, I just come out of business school, working on a trading floor, doing equity options, and thought it was interesting how Ben Bernanke, Hank Paulson, the government, everyone was saying was a perfect storm no one could have seen coming. Yet, fortunately, I found there were a couple of people who did see it coming. They were all talking about Austrian economics, what happens when the Fed raises or lowers interest rates when you're putting money into the economy. And, you know, again, it's great when, as Ben Bernanke talked about in his op-ed back in 2010, you get the effects of the easy credit, yet when you remove that, it's a little bit more difficult, which certainly we're seeing playing out now. And again, this year there's been a lot of talk about the Fed pivot, which even now we've seen it's probably not going to be this year, maybe a lot longer than people expected, although I think there's that widespread assumption that at some point, you know, you keep raising interest rates and you have all that debt out there, that you're going to run into a problem, and perhaps that's what it will take for, to really see a next leg higher in the precious metals prices. But that's what the book was getting at, that there's an imbalance building here that hasn't gone away. It's still there, and we'll see how it ultimately plays out. But it's not an ideal situation out there with where the corner the Fed's backed into at this point.
So if your thesis was strong on silver before, I got to believe with all the fundamentals out there, you got to believe in it even more now.
Well, I guess it depends where you think this is all headed. I've had a hard time getting around how there isn't eventually some sort of restructure, whether that's an overt reset or not, of the U.S. debt loads. It's still out there. And I guess the difference now, we've seen Russia, China, it's almost as if there's someone to stand up to the dollar bully now, where I think there were a lot of countries and entities around the globe before that realized this money's not getting paid back, yet what could you do about it? And I think that's one thing that's changed this year. We saw Russia go to a temporary gold backing of the ruble. They're talking about a basket of currencies behind a basket of commodities behind the currency, going forward, and certainly in that environment, where the world's increasingly going to real things as opposed to paper, you would think that silver is going to have its moment. Has not come yet, but a lot of the things that at least led me into it are still out there and without any immediate or easy resolution in sight.
Jim Rickards talks of a digital dollar on December 12th, I believe. What does that do to the price of silver if something like that happens?
We'll see. I know he's a big fan of gold and silver, and we hear the central banks talking about these digital currencies. That's a little bit of a scary environment to me, just the way it's tracking everything we do so much. A bit of an open question of how that affects silver. If they were successful implementing something like that, I guess you can move on without silver, but it seems to me like there's a shift of power to the east, and even if the U.S. goes to central bank digital currency, you're still going to have that need for commodities going forward, and which I think will be including silver in some capacity.
So for all those investors who've had it handed to them here short term, what's your message to them?
Well, know why you're getting into silver. The Silver Institute's showing we've seen a deficit the last couple of years, and it's not getting easier to find silver, especially current price level. You're not encouraging more people to go out there starting new projects. I think one thing I've probably missed on earlier was not having enough diversification, so being careful on going overboard on silver, yet I think at today's price level, certainly on the lower end of the range, there's still a great role for silver in the portfolio, and just making sure you're balancing all those things together.
Yeah, let's guide a little bit on that. How does Chris Marcus attack this thing? There's bullion, there's junior mining stocks, there's a paper game. How do you attack it?
I think having a mix of all of those is a good way to go. I mean, juniors have been beaten up pretty thoroughly. Silver on its low end, but I guess that's going to be a personal thing. I know some people are more or less comfortable with the risk of the mining stocks, and if you have projects that can withstand the storm, I mean, with the levels that they've gotten down to, you'd think there would be a rebound coming, especially when you get higher metals prices. But given that you don't know the timing on that, being careful about some of the projects you get into, if they're able to raise capital or if they can make it through that cycle. So some challenging questions, but things to think about when you're planning all that out.
Yeah, certainly no shortage of catalysts to ignite this market, I guess. Any surprises that you think they're in the back of your mind that could happen here? And obviously you had a war in Ukraine. You've got 87,000 IRS agents being hired here. There's a lot going on here, and I think that all feeds into the precious metal game.
Yeah, and I think that's why people look to silver still, of something outside of the system. What we've seen in the last couple of years, especially with the pandemic and everything since then, at least to me, has opened the range of unusual events that are possible and things that people are concerned about, and at least having some means of something that's outside of the system, I think, can go a long way, and haven't seen that reflected in the price yet, but I think that's what is drawing a lot of people in, and perhaps going forward, if you have central bank digital currencies or new issues popping up, I think there's always going to be some sort of role for the metals in there.
Talk about Arcadia. What's your message to investors?
Just trying to provide information, education. We bring on different guests, a wide range of perspectives of trying to see how this plays out. I guess maybe in the past decade it seemed a little bit clearer than now, where just with everything we've lived through in the past couple of years, I don't think anyone knows exactly how this is going to go. So that's why I have the show and bring on the smartest people I can find out there, just get different ideas and ways to approach this and provide information that can help people make good decisions on how to handle things going forward.
And what's the website?
ArcadiaEconomics.com.
Okay, it's Chris Marcus here. He wrote this Big Silver Short, fantastic book. Get it. Chris, thanks for making the trip.
Thanks, Rob. Good to see you again.
Good to see you.